Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I am, on behalf of the DEI committee for the Penn-Del-Jersey chapter, I'm thrilled to be able to welcome you to this presentation on neurodiversity, hosted together with Peg Monaghan, the Associate Director of the Center for Autism and Neurodiversity at Drexel University, and Dr. Amy Edwards, the Director of the Center for Autism and Neurodiversity. I've had the opportunity to speak with these two folks a few times so far on this topic. It's an extremely fascinating subject, and I believe that everyone here is going to gain a lot from this presentation. So that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Edwards and Peg.
Thanks. And you can just call me Amy. You don't have to call me Dr. Edwards.
Sounds good.
Only if I'm mad at you do I make you call me Dr. Edwards. Anyway, so hi, everybody. I am Amy Edwards. I'm the Director of the Center for Autism and Neurodiversity. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Just let us know. So, and if I talk too fast, let me know that too. So, realities. There's been a decline in the amount of college students that are heading towards us. So, in the past 10 years, there's been a decline because the birth rate 18 years ago was lower. But with that, there's also an increase in students with disabilities that are attending college. So, in a 2016 American Freshman Survey found that 21.9% of respondents self-identified as having a disability. And the CDC study, as we know, 1 in 6 children have a developmental disability, 1 in 36 have autism. But the thing is, so there's a decline, but the students that are coming towards us will have IEPs, 504s. They will have disabilities and need accommodations. And 44% of the people that are, or the children that are affected, have an average or above average intellectual ability. So they're not the more severely affected children. It's the average and above average that are going to be heading towards us very soon. So what is autism? And anybody can jump in here. There's no wrong answer. You know, I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks. Didn't think you were going to have to participate today, did you? Don't all jump at once. All right.
I think we have a lot to learn, Amy.
All right. Yeah, I would say.
Nina here. I just know it's a neurological disorder, and it affects the way people communicate and learn, an array of any other forms that it could come in.
Okay, good answer. Ken, were you going to say something?
That to me, like autism is, I guess, the way certain individuals track their path of learning. It's quite different than the quote unquote normal path of learning. They learn a different way. It's not like they're, to me, like they don't know and understand certain things. It's just the way they view things mentally.
Yep.
Different than what society deems as normal.
Does anybody know what neurodiversity is? Have you heard of neurodiversity?
I have. Hence, I am a certified diversity professional, so
Okay.
I don't randomly know this information. I have took courses and whatnot to learn this information, so I don't know if I should answer, but neurodiversity, as far as I know, is just the way people's mind work, how their brain receives and gets information to their brain may be different.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know anyone with autism or who is neurodivergent? Absolutely. Okay, great.
Yes.
So neurodiversity is viewed, I'm going to get into autism in a minute. And you know, you're right on point. Neurodiversity is viewed as a concept and social movement that advocates for viewing autism as a difference in human wiring rather than a disease to be cured. So it's not necessarily something that needs to be, you know, solved or cured. It's just a difference. People are different. So neurodiversity could be ADHD, autism, anxiety. There's all different pieces that can go into neurodiversity itself. So What is autism? It's a complex developmental disability. It's defined by a certain set of behaviors. There's no test for, meaning when I say there's no test for autism, I mean there's no blood test. You can't take a blood test and say, oh, well, I'm positive for autism. It doesn't work that way. And vaccines do not cause autism. Just throwing that one out there. It is a spectrum disorder, so it affects individuals differently and to varying degrees. You could meet 12 people with autism and they could all be completely different. No one person with autism is the same. The common traits that they have are that they have difficulties interacting socially. They have limited verbal and nonverbal communication, and most have repetitive behavior. And then neurodiversity, it's a concept where neurological differences are, and I told you this earlier, dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD, Tourette's, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. There's a whole, I could keep going. But it's basically a difference in neurological issues. So Center for Autism, what our students look like. So there's kind of a myth that there is this savant. Everyone who's autistic is a savant. We have plenty of students who are terrible at math, are terrible at computers, but they're really good writers, or vice versa. Every student's different. Not every student can, play classical piano, beautifully and is a music genius or whatever. Each person is different. So what does autism look like, to get a little bit deeper? Impairment in the use of nonverbal behavior. So a lot of people with autism don't make eye contact, and that's okay. It's very hard for someone to focus on what someone's saying and also listen and comprehend and process. So they look elsewhere. Failure to develop peer relations, a lack of seeking to share enjoyment and interest with others. So, a little child might say, Mom, look, there's a plane, and they point and they take their mom's face and they say, Mom, and point. There's a lot of processing going on in someone's brain for that. So someone with autism may not be able to do that. And a lack of social emotional reciprocity. So Nina, since you answered so many questions, I'm going to pick on you. So if I said to you, my cat is sick, what would you say?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I don't have a cat, I have a dog. But anyway, if someone with autism might say, I saw this really cool video on trains this morning, and go on for 25 minutes about the train video that they saw and not understand the social emotional reciprocity, that the expected answer is, oh, I'm so sorry, what happened to your cat? So that's a learned behavior. A lot of people with autism tend to mask, is what it's called. It's like they're on stage all day. So they have to, all of the things that may come naturally to a lot of us are learned behaviors for them, and they have to practice them over and over. So it can be difficult. So communication, it's another one. Delay in or total lack of development of spoken language. Difficulty understanding others' language. Sometimes things need to be said a little bit clearer or said differently. Marked impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation. A lot of our students know how to say, hi, how are you? And then have no idea where to go with the conversation from there. And repetitive use of language. Some students tend to repeat the same things over and over, kind of like as a calming system for themselves. And behavior. Preoccupation with specific interests. We have, our students tend to like video games a lot. We have one student who is obsessed with trains, like I mentioned. Inflexible adherence to specific non-functional routines or rituals. Difficulty with change and transition, and repetitive motor mannerisms. So hand flapping or rocking. The thing is with a lot of those things, it may look different. It's not what people do normally, but if it's not bothering anybody, does it matter? Like we have a student who had to get up and pace. So he told the instructor, he was like, look, I have to get up and pace. I will get up and leave the room and pace so it doesn't disrupt anybody else. I just want to let you know so you don't think I'm just walking out on class. And he did that, and he did fine. So, sometimes there's just a little bit of understanding that needs to go on. And challenging activities. Sorry if I'm talking too fast. Challenging activities for a lot of people. And, the things that I'm telling you are good for anybody. It's from a universal design perspective. So a lot of these things, you know, can apply to anybody. They don't just have to be neurodivergent. But multi-step directions and activities. So the example that I always give is my daughter has ADHD. I have 4 kids. The oldest one's autistic, and my daughter's ADHD, and we're not sure about the other ones. But so multi-step directions and activities. So if I say to my daughter, go clean your room, that means nothing. If I say, go vacuum your floor, go dust your dresser, bring your dirty clothes downstairs, that she will understand. Doesn't mean she's going to do it, but she will understand it. Following verbal directions. So, you know, sometimes things need to be written down. Me personally, I'm a visual learner. I need to see things on paper in order for me to actually, you know, for me to process it. And sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes people, you know, need to hear it. So sometimes you might want to say things or do things to get the message across a little bit differently. Communicating wants and needs. Sometimes it's very hard to put into words what someone needs. So sometimes you may need to prompt a little bit. Tolerating changes in routine. You know, I give the example of students who came from high school into college. They went from a bell telling them when to leave a room to go to another room. And all of a sudden they're in class and there's 2 hours between class. They need to figure out what to do with that. So there's a lot of changes there. Highly stimulating environments. When you're in, like, and again, I'm using student examples here, but like we have a campus activities fair. There's a gazillion people. It's hot. It's on a lawn. There's all these, there's music and there's all these people, and I stay away from it as much as possible. But you know, that kind of environment can be very, it's like overload on sensory, on your senses, and transitioning between activities can sometimes be tough. You know, when you're in the middle of a project and you're really deep in it, and then somebody, you know, comes in and takes you off of it, and it kind of like jolts you. It's like that all the time for a lot of people with autism. So what do some of these challenges look like, you know, in college? Some students may lack self-advocacy skills. They may not know how to do it. Some don't understand social cues. They don't understand boundaries. The biggest thing you could do is be black and white. You know, I had a student who stood and listened to somebody talk for 25 minutes about Super Mario Brothers video game because she felt bad and didn't want to hurt their feelings. The best thing that she could have done is said, look, I have to be in class in 5 minutes. I'm really glad that you like your video game. Let's meet at 3 o'clock and you can tell me a little bit more about it for 5 minutes. And then I'll tell you how my day's going. You know, like, it's okay. You don't have to be condescending, but be black and white, give boundaries. And I'll get into that in a second. Repeat words or phrases. You know, that's sometimes scripting. They have to, it's like a repetitive, sensory to help them. Engage in repetitive hand movements, like I said. We don't really have students that engage in self-injurious behavior. Scream, cry, or engage in tantrum-like behavior. We don't really have students like that. I'm not going to go into that too much. And then when people don't disclose. So once a student graduates high school, they're no longer covered under the IDEA. They're then covered under ADA. So, you know, they went from being entitled to supports where everybody knew what their accommodations were, everybody knew what they were entitled to now eligible for them, and nobody knows anything. And nobody's going to know anything because it's illegal. So it's illegal for anyone to ask. So you can't ask someone, oh, are you autistic? Can't do that. What I tend to tell advisors to say is, you know, I see that you're struggling. Did you have any additional supports that helped you in previous educational environments? Something to that effect. That way you're not asking, to me, it's a label. I don't really care what the label is. I just want to know how I can help. So that's kind of how I look at it. We did have a student who years and years ago, who was stalking and didn't understand the boundaries around, well, this person's my friend, so why can't I call them at 3 a.m. and why can't I, you know, go knock on her door and 25 times a day or whatever it was. So in that case, you know, give parameters. I give examples like, okay, you know, Tell them they can only text you 3 times a day. Tell them they can only come to your room twice a day between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Tell them, you know, you can only spend 10 minutes talking about X, Y, and Z, but give them specific, concrete parameters around things. And, you know, and this could go for anybody. And that's, you know, that helps the other person as well. Hyper focus on an interest. I talked about that. Asking too many questions in class. So, you know, you always have that one student in class who just takes the conversation off in a completely different direction and asks a million questions. Give them 3 rubber bands. Tell them they have to think of, you know, they only have 3 chances to ask questions in class, and it has to be relevant to the class. So every time they ask a question, they take a rubber band off of one wrist and put it on the other one. So then by the time they get to 3, they're out. They have to wait until the end of class to ask any more questions. That way it helps them focus on what they really want to focus on or need to focus on. And it also doesn't take away from the rest of the class. So strategies for success. Biggest thing I can say, be kind and be patient. You know, sometimes it might take somebody a few seconds to really process what you're saying and to formulate an answer. And those seconds can be kind of awkward. That's okay. It's not awkward for the other person. It shouldn't be awkward. Then don't make it awkward for yourself. Just give them time to process and to answer the question. Be flexible with your communication. If someone's not understanding what you're saying, or they're not completing the task that you want them to, say it differently. Say, you know, or have them repeat it back to you so that you know that they understand it the way you do. Reduce sensory distractions. Sometimes the lights in the room, the noise, the temperature, there's all different things that can affect a room, even for yourself. Think of a more calming space for yourself and what can be calming for other people as well. And I'm not going to worry about ignoring and your behavior. Peg, am I still going?
Yeah, go ahead. Finish. You
Okay.
can finish up this section. Yeah.
All right. So there are a couple different autism initiatives at Drexel. So John Fry is currently the president and CEO, not for much longer. And then there's the AJ Drexel Autism Institute and the Center for Autism and Neurodiversity. The AJ Drexel Autism Institute is a public health community-facing institute. Research institute. They do research from a public health perspective. We support students and we support the campus on creating a more neurodiverse environment and supporting neurodivergent students. I previously worked at the Institute. I was a researcher there, so we do work closely with them, but we are 2 separate entities. And then, am I still got, how many more am I?
Yep, go ahead. A couple more.
So there's 5 of us in CAN. Myself, Peg, Lindsay, Joe, Deb. I'm not going to read them off to you. And what do we do? So the biggest thing we do is academic coaching, because if students can't academically make it, it's not going to matter if they can do anything else. So we work on academic coaching. We meet with them once a week. It's meant to be a fading support. So in the beginning, we do a lot. And then hopefully by senior year, they're just coming back to say hi. We do employment coaching. Peg can talk about that a little bit more. We have social hours and study hours. There's a lot of touch points. So it's not just the one meeting through academic coaching. We meet them a lot. The EDEX 101, 102, and 103 course that we offer during the first 3 terms. The first 2 terms gets more into working in groups, time management, public safety, hygiene. The 3rd course Peg teaches, she'll talk about that. We also have peer mentors. We have NeuroDragons, which is a student organization, which is another way for our students to be social. I always make sure that there's pizza and cookies there, so that always attracts students. All students need to sign consent forms that allow us, because the laws changed to ADA, that allow us to talk to people across campus. We'll never talk for a student. So if a student has an issue, we will help them with a professor, let's say. We'll help them figure out how to draft the email. We'll help them figure out how to, have the conversation. We'll practice the conversation with them, but the communication comes from them, not us, because they're not going to learn anything if we're doing it for them. We also have a neurodiverse friendly housing initiative that we just started. We piloted it last year. This is the first official year. And it's neurodiverse friendly. It's not just neurodivergent students, but it has a few more supports around it, but nothing major. We have a cooking class that we offer. We also, all students, you know, do iPad check-ins when they come in. We have a new space in the basement increase. It's not so new anymore because it's like 2 years old now. I'm trying to think what I'm forgetting. We do the summer program with Dragons Prep, and we work closely with Steinbright. Oh, I talked about the neurodiverse hiring initiative. Oops. We also have a neurodiverse colleague resource group for employees at Drexel. We are starting a neurodiverse colleague resource group for family members of people who are neurodivergent. I talked about that. Oh, and we're at the Alliance of College to Career Autism Programs. So there's a lot of different colleges who have programs similar to ours. And we created an alliance because we all kind of collaborate together. Other things to know. There's been a 300% increase in participation. We have 100% we have close to 100% co-op placement rate. We do charge for the program, but Peg and I decided we weren't going to start charging until we had a way for families to pay for it. So we worked with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in Pennsylvania, and they agreed that if a student is registered with them, they will pay for the program for them. It doesn't matter what their financial need is. And we were voted the #1 best college for students with autism. Student responsibility differences. I don't know. I think I kind of went over
Already
that.
talked a little bit about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So high school tutoring might be part of the IEP. Tutoring's different, doesn't fall under disability resources. Time and assignments are structured for students in high school. Students have to structure their own time. That's the biggest thing. Students spend a lot of time alone, and I don't think they realize how much time they're going to spend alone in college. They have to follow the code of conduct on their own. There's little time spent studying outside of class in high school, and most studying is outside of class in college. So there's a lot of self-regulation in college. And that's it for me.
This is where I can pick up.
All right.
Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
I'm going to pick up a
You want to do questions at the end?
Maybe we should do questions now, and then if there's any questions right now about what Amy talked about, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the employment side of what we do here.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
So Amy, real quick, I guess you said that some other schools have this kind of program as well. Did you say almost every school has something like this, or is it?
No.
Okay.
There's anywhere between 60 and 70 programs out there. I'm going to put a website in here that lists. So if you go to collegeautismspectrum.com, that'll list most of the other programs that are out there. If you have questions about other programs, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to talk about it or connect you with people. We recommend students to other places all the time. Don't tell Drexel I said that. Other questions? No? Okay. I'm going to mute and I'm going to share for Peg.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. I have the slides up here, so so what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the employment side and how we support our students employment wise. So as you know, as you may or may not know, here at Drexel, our students, most of them are required to do 3 6-month work experiences while they're here. So they don't graduate in 4 years, they graduate in 5 years. We have a great career placement, career services department that we work very closely with to help our students find what I would say find, get, and keep the opportunities. And Amy mentioned that I teach an employment class in the 3rd quarter that the students are here. And this is the kind of the path, the trajectory, the process that we take in that class, from helping the students identify what their skills are to being a work style profile is a document that we're now working with students to create so that they can communicate to employers what their preferences are in their work style. Do they, lighting, sound, they would rather get their assignments in writing. Sometimes they may need a little extra time. So if the student knows that about themselves as an employee, they can talk to an employer, and the employer knows what that student may need. We talk about resumes. We talk about their personal brand, that elevator pitch. How do they answer the question, tell me about yourself? You know, probably the most important question in the interview process. We're learning that LinkedIn is now becoming really important for employers to look at and see what the student is interested in. Their portfolio, examples of their work. So for our engineering students, a drawing or an example of something they did in an engineering class. And then the process of applying and interviewing. I'm going to talk in a minute about the interview. For students who are neurodiverse, the interview is the hardest part of getting the job. Once they interview and get the job, the process of onboarding, you know, what the forms they need to fill out, the information they need, knowing how to get there. We talk about all of that. And one thing that I would tell any employer is the idea of helping their new employee keep the job. That, like Amy showed you some of the conditions that are, you know, as a student, you're going to see that in your employees, right? Maybe someone rocking or someone stimming while they're working. Sometimes employers don't see that because the candidate is masking, and then when they get upset, you know, or get anxious in the job, that some of these behaviors will come out. How do we make sure that your employee or any employee knows who they can talk to as a job coach to get support? Amy, go to the next slide. So I think I already talked about this, right? Students are required to do 3 co-ops while they're here. We provide the supplementary sources, and the hardest part for our students is really the interview. We work hard with them on their resumes, and we load their resumes up with as much experience as we can, whether it's a summer job or a volunteer opportunity that they took, or an example of a project they did in work, in the classroom, right? So the process we follow here is the students request interviews, then they're invited to the interviews, they schedule the interviews. We work with the students in preparing for them, right? Being able to know what the organization they're interviewing with, what they do, what do they make, what do they do, right? Then the interview questions. Again, the biggest question, tell me about yourself. Many of our students, if you say, tell me about yourself, they'll say, John, and I'm a computer science major. Well, we try and coach them to be able to provide the interviewer and the employer with enough information so that the interviewer can ask direct questions, right? This year we had an organization asking our students, what color were they, right? Last year that organization was asking our students, what lamp are they? And for students who are neurodivergent, asking them a question like that, they start thinking about how the lamp is constructed and how, you know, what color the light bulb is. And they start returning answers to the employer, and the employer's like, well, no, I just wanted to know if they were a desk lamp or whether they were overhead light that lit up the room, right? So we try to make sure that resumes are packed with enough information for the employer to be able to ask questions about the experience on their resume. One of the questions that I've used in the past as an example here is a candidate being asked how many baseballs fit in a swimming pool, right? For many of our neurodivergent students, they would start asking questions back. Well, what are the dimensions of the swimming pool, and what is the slope of the pool? And they'll start doing the calculations in their head and come back with an answer, and the interviewer's like, oh, right? So we want to support our students so that we want to take them to the front door of an opportunity we can't knock on the door and get them through it. They have to do that on their own. And then we work with them once they get the offer, right? Making sure, actually getting a lot of work gets done in the earlier part. If they're requesting an interview, we want to make sure they know how to get there. We want to make sure they know where the location is and all of the logistical things around the job. Once they get the offer, helping them be prepared for the interview. Go ahead, Amy, if you go to the next slide. So why do we, maybe one of the reasons we support our students so rigorously in the employment space is that we know that 90% of the people who are neurodivergent are either unemployed or underemployed. Many of our students, not many of our students, no, not for us. Many young adults with autism who, some of them have graduated from college, some have not, wind up sitting in their basement playing video games, and we want to get them out of the basement and we want to get them working. Much of the challenge is attributed to the traditional recruitment process. So some organizations, face-to-face interviews are difficult. We try to limit it to one-on-one. We ask one-on-one interviews so that the student's not jumping between interviewers. Job descriptions, there's in the community of neurodiverse employment, talking about making sure that job descriptions describe the job, right? The bullet point of great communication skills. Well, what does that really mean, right? How do we help describe that better? Because many of our students will say, well, I'm not really great at communicating. I can't apply for that job, right? And we sit and we talk about how they have the other skills and maybe the communication skills are something they can learn. And also in flexible working arrangements. Sometimes our candidates need maybe a hybrid situation, right? That's working very well for our students, and also our I'm trying to think maybe they can't be in the office at 8 a.m. but maybe a 10 to 6 work environment would be better for them, right? So part of this is helping back in that work style profile, trying to help the student know themselves so that they could pass that off to an employer. Another slide, Amy. Thank you. So I like this quote. As an employer, we want you to find the best person for the job, not the person who interviews best, right? So we want people to interview looking for skills rather than they like the Phillies. I often use the story of, I would love to know the statistics on, Super Bowl week, when the Eagles are in the Super Bowl. People who interview during that week, the interview is all about how the interviewer and the interviewee loves the Eagles. Isn't it great? And then the middle of February, when the person shows up for their first couple weeks of work, the manager realizes, oh, we never asked about their skill. We only talked about the Eagles, right? And we're good friends of the Eagles Foundation here, Eagles Autism Foundation here. So it's good to be a fan of the Eagles. So some of the things that a candidate may ask for as an accommodation and part of the interview to making sure that you're getting the right person is the questions in advance. So I would not say the exact questions, right? But say, for example, a computer science student and they're interviewing for a programming job that's going to use Java. You're going to say, I'm going to ask you about Java, right? You're not going to say, I'm going to ask you about the difference between encapsulation and instantiation, right? You may need to reword the questions when you ask, right? If Amy pointed this point out, you may ask a question of a candidate. It's okay for them to pause a few seconds before they answer because they're processing their answer. But if you see that pause is too long, you may want to reword the question for you. We work with students to have them ask to say, could you reword that for me, please? Right? We want the student to identify accommodations they might need, the lighting, headphones. They're the big ones. Sometimes extra time. Many of them have extra time here on campus for their projects and their assignments, but extra time sometimes in the work world is hard because you have a deadline with a customer to meet. So if you have a deadline of Friday to get something out to a customer, our neurodiverse talent, really, they need to finish it on time. So accommodations, they're reasonable accommodations in the workplace. Alternate ways to assess their skills. So maybe in the interview process, instead of asking them questions, strengths and weaknesses, and we're seeing this more and more with some of our engineering and computer science students. Not just our neurodiverse students, but all of our students are being asked to complete a small project, like build something for me, or write some code, or draw something for me as part of the interview process, right? Ask direct questions, not general questions, right? Be direct, right? Avoid yes or no questions, right? Because if you ask the question with a yes or no answer, most times you're just going to get the yes or no. You're not going to get the why of the yes or no. And use examples when you're questioning people. All right, Amy, one more. So, any questions, any comments? Maybe this is where I could interject. I didn't put a slide in for this. In talking to Aaron, I realized that most of you are from different organizations around electrical contracting. If you are not a company who participates in Drexel's co-op program and would be interested in, I'd love to connect you with the Career Services Office. And then I guess the next question would be, if you were interested in hiring one of our Drexel students in a co-op opportunity, knowing that the co-op goes from March to September, and at the end of, you would hire the student, see if your organization was neurodiverse friendly, which we hope they all are, and bring a student in and do a pilot of hiring. I would love and be happy to talk to you about it. Okay. Now questions.
Yeah, I have a question. How many students do you actually have in your program at Drexel?
So as of the fall, we'll have about 150.
With autism?
Neurodivergent, yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
We don't meet with 150 students a week. We'd be crazy. It's meant to be fading support. So the incoming students are the students that we meet mostly with, and that kind of fades.
But I guess, Amy, I would qualify that by saying we have 150 students who know this is a trusted place they can come to and say they need help with something, right? So last year we had a student who graduated, and the year before he was having a tough time with one of his classes, and he just came into my office and flopped in his chair and said, I messed up. All right, what did you do? Well, I handed in my assignment late and my teacher told me tough luck, right? So what Amy and I and the rest of the group do is we won't go to that professor and plead for the student, but we'll help the student plead and advocate for themselves so that the student, the teacher said, we drafted an email,
So that they
said
will
what we
need
needed to
skills.
say in it, and the teacher gave the student an extra 24 hours to get it done, right?
Or they
So-
have 24 hours and the student figures it out.
Right?
Right,
And the
there's that
student,
lesson
yeah,
too, but
right.
yeah. Other questions?
What would you say is the most important thing for an employer to know while working with a neurodiverse employee?
Well, the bottom line is patience, trust, right? And I, let me back up a little. I would say to any employer who calls me and says, Peg, we want to hire a neurodiverse student. And I'll say, do you have a business need? Right? Please don't hire someone just because it's the charitable thing to do, right? That usually doesn't work out. So the first thing is, do you have a business need? Second of all, hiring someone who has the skills and interest to fill that business need. Because just like any of us, if we don't like what we're doing, there's a chance we're not going to do a good job, right? Or we're not going to be happy with if we're not happy with what you're doing, after any period of time, you start to get miserable, right? And for many of our students, right, they become miserable then, or for anybody, you go home and and that miserableness rubs off on your family and your friends. And so that's, I think finding the business need and then finding the right talent for that role that you need is what I would tell an employer.
I would say, if there's one thing, it would be make sure you're giving clear, exact instructions. Like don't assume anything. And usually once somebody gets a project and they understand each piece of it, they're then good to go typically. And you can give them a project and it's going to be done. For example, my son is a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning tech, right? He's like the poster child for the company. He shows up every day because he loves routine. He's there every day. He's pressed. He knows how to upsell, but it's the routine. It's the, they know that they can rely on him. So, but it took him a little while to get the hang of it because it had to be spelled out. So.
Certainly. Okay. Thank you. I guess one final question just from me. Would you say that if you're working with, let's say you have an employee that is autistic or is on the autism spectrum or something like that, would they take work criticism in a different way than people who do not have autism? Like critiquing their work in some way, is that a topic that should be approached differently from the employer perspective?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so, Peg.
No, and I think many of our students whether they're prior to coming here to Drexel, I work with professionals. They take criticism sometimes better because they want it, right? They don't get offended by that criticism, right? Now, again, the one thing I didn't say is but Amy said it. One person with autism is everyone in the world is different. So everybody accepts things differently. But I think for the folks that I've met more in the professional side, and even our students, they want to know, they want the feedback. They want it to be honest feedback, because if there's something they're not doing right, they want to fix it. Right.
I also think, somebody has a disability, you want to make accommodations, you don't want to make exceptions. If someone's not following the code of conduct and they're not doing their job or whatever it is, they're not doing their job. I mean, and they need to be told that, autistic, disability or not. At the end of the day, the business still needs to run. So.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, Amy. Like when you hire someone, they have to be able to do the job. Right. They just have, that's
right.
And if they
might need a little
can't,
more training.
but
yeah.
or we used to talk about it being like more runway, right? So they may not take off right away like a helicopter does. They may need a little extra runway space. But to Amy's point, what we see is that once they know the job and they know the routine and they know what they need to do, they're going to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
In all likelihood, they're going to do a good job.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, all right. Well, Amy, Peg, I want to thank you again for presenting today. This was awesome. I am going to post this recording, I believe, on our YouTube page and then on our website just so that people can review it later. There were some other folks interested in this talk who weren't able to attend, so I'll make sure this gets out to them. For anyone on this call who might be interested in learning more about this topic, or if you're interested in potentially working with the co-op program to take in a co-op, please let me know and I can connect you with Peg and Amy after this call.
Yeah, we'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Yep.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you very much. It was really great information and very educational for me as well. So thank you.
Great. Thanks
I
for
wanna
having us.
thank
Thank
you as
you.
well.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Everyone. Bye-bye
Thanks,
now.
everybody.
Great day.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.